Those verses describe God's command to eliminate a tribe called the Amalekites. And not just the draft-age men, but all of them, including children and infants. All of them. Kill all of them. Destroy all of their property. Slay all of their animals. This is God's command. So when Benjamin Netanyahu describes the Palestinians as Amalek twice in the first month of the Gaza operation, you don't need to guess what the point of this is. The point is to destroy every man, woman, and child and infant in Gaza. And they set about doing that. But it wasn't just Netanyahu who said that. It was a lot of different authorities in Israel. And in fact, so 3 days after the Hamas attacks, the defense minister of Israel, their own Pete Hegseth, described his plans for Gaza, not for Hamas, for the entire territory, for the over 2 million people who live there. And we're quoting, "No electricity, no food will be allowed in. We are fighting human animals."
What Carlson lays out here is hard to sit with. He's pointing to the language itself, the Amalek reference, the call to leave nothing behind, not even the children. When a head of state reaches for a scripture about total annihilation, the words aren't decoration, they signal intent. And then the defense minister follows with no electricity, no food, calling 2 million people human animals. Carlson's argument is that none of this was hidden. It was said openly on the record more than once. That's what makes you stop and think. This wasn't a secret plan uncovered later, it was announced. So the real question he's building toward isn't just what Israel did, it's why the people who spent their careers warning the world about genocide went silent when it actually unfolded in front of them. And that's where this gets really uncomfortable.
It was horrifying, and as the details of what happened during what is now referred to as the Rwandan genocide filtered out to the rest of the world, people were stunned and nauseated by it and bewildered that something like this could happen. Not that long after the most famous genocide in history in the 1940s in Europe, to which we'd all said, well, that could never happen again. Well, it did. A version of it did happen in Rwanda. But what was even more distressing and in some ways shocking, the world knew it was happening as it happened and did nothing to stop it, and in most cases said nothing about it, even when it was in progress. From the very beginning, 4 days after the genocide in Rwanda started, a Swiss journalist in Kigali, the capital, published a piece in a French newspaper saying, I have interviewed 8 officials, and there's a genocide going on in Rwanda. This ran in a Western paper and then was picked up in other Western papers, but no one did anything. So the Red Cross knew it was happening, the UN knew it was happening, there were UN troops in Rwanda, the French government knew it was happening, there were French troops there. The nation of Israel knew it was happening. Israel had been a supporter of the Hutu government for decades. In fact, it seems pretty obvious that some of the bullets and grenades used to murder Tutsis were sold to the Hutu government by the Israelis. And in fact, there's some evidence, apparently, that the Israeli government sold weapons to the Hutu government during the genocide, which were used to murder Tutsis. We say apparently because the documents surrounding this have been classified. They're under seal per orders of an Israeli court, on the grounds that were they to become public, it would be bad for Israel's image globally. So the Israelis knew, and the Clinton administration famously knew it was happening, but for domestic political reasons, didn't act to stop it. The world cannot allow genocide to happen again. If people find out this is happening, they have to act. That's the mark of civilization. Do you stop mass murder of civilians on ethnic grounds, genocide? And if you don't, then you're not civilized. The United States, she wrote, has a moral obligation to intervene with force if it determines that a genocide is underway. What's the point of having the world's largest military if you can't at least try to prevent a genocide? And in a fairly short period of time, a close advisor to then candidate Barack Obama. He was elected in 2008 and promptly made her the chairman of the Atrocity Prevention Board. You may not have known such a thing existed, but it does. It's an interagency group. It still exists. Name slightly different. But its purpose is in the name, preventing atrocities, using the power of the U.S. government to prevent atrocities. Well, there weren't many well-publicized genocides during the first Obama term, but Samantha Power stuck around. She ended up teaching at Harvard Law School, and then Biden is elected. or becomes president in 2020, and she goes back into the White House. At this point, she is the head of USAID, the United States Agency for International Development. She also has a seat on the National Security Council. She is a high-level foreign policy person in the Biden administration. Well, it just so happens that during her time there, the thing that she warned about, wrote about, actually happened. Another genocide. This one took place in Gaza. And shortly after the attacks by Hamas into southern Israel in October of 2023, Israel decided to murder as many people as it possibly could in Gaza with the aim of getting the entire population to leave Gaza so Israel could take over Gaza. Now, we're not guessing about this because Israeli officials said out loud, this is our plan. And then they tried to do it. Samantha Power, famous for opposing genocide, said not a word about this. Of course, by this point, 30 years after the Rwandan genocide, Samantha Power's view of genocide appeared to have changed. So the way to fight genocide really was to empower women and girls in the LGBT community. Fight the patriarchy. That's how you prevent genocide. But when an actual genocide occurred on her watch, as someone with a seat on the National Security Council, Samantha Power did and said nothing. She's now back at Harvard Law School, but she has actually been asked about this. You're the genocide lady, but you did nothing to stop genocide after writing a book scolding the rest of us for doing nothing to stop genocide? Why is that? She didn't respond well. I'm not here to answer questions like that, she said. You can look it up. It's an amazing exchange. What she did not say was, you're absolutely right. I wrote a book saying the civilized world can't allow genocide to happen, and then I allowed it to happen. But that's exactly what she did. But what's even more interesting is that she's not alone in this. Everybody knew from the first week after October 7th that Israel planned to commit genocide, traditionally defined genocide, targeting a population because of their bloodline and trying to exterminate or move them. Everyone knew this because Israel announced it. Twice in October of 2023, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, said out loud in a public speech, the Palestinians are Amalek. Amalek, a reference that many in the West didn't get, but everyone in the region understood. And it's a reference to 1 Samuel 15. The first verse is in it, which you should read, because it tells you a lot about what Israel's doing now.
In this video, Tucker Carlson makes a case that's impossible to ignore. He argues that Israel openly declared its intentions in Gaza, invoking the biblical command to destroy Amalek down to the children, and then backed those words with a blockade on food and electricity. What struck me most wasn't just the brutality he describes, it was his point about silence. He draws a sharp line from Rwanda, where the world watched and did nothing, to Samantha Power, the so-called genocide lady, who built a career condemning inaction, yet said nothing when it mattered on her own watch. Whether or not you agree with every claim, the deeper question lands. What good are our moral principles if we abandon them the moment they become inconvenient? Carlson is forcing us to confront our own hypocrisy, and that to me is the most damning part of all.